Hello and welcome to this short video on literature. Literature has its roots in the oral tradition. Epic poems such as the Iliad and the Odyssey, written around the 9th century BCE, were originally spoken aloud by poets performing for royal audiences. Even though Chaucer, author of the Canterbury Tales, wrote his works down on paper in the 14th century, he only did so for convenience, as they were generally spoken aloud instead of read. Let's take a look at how speaking words aloud can evoke poetic meaning by reading John Masefield's poem Cargoes. Quinquereme of Nineveh from distant Ophir, rowing home to haven in sunny Palestine, with a cargo of ivory and apes and peacocks, sandalwood, cedarwood, and sweet white wine. Stately Spanish galleon coming from the isthmus, dipping through the tropics by the palm-green shores, with a cargo of diamonds, emeralds, amethysts, topazes, and cinnamon, and gold moidores. Dirty British coaster with a salt cake smokestack, butting through the channel in the mad March days, with a cargo of tine coal, road rails, pig lead, firewood, ironware, and cheap tin trays. Notice how the sound of the words paints a picture just as much as the images that the poet calls up. There is certainly quite a difference between the first two stanzas and the last one. Exotic and luxury cargo of Ophir in Spain give way to the less glamorous, but no less important cargo of the dirty British coaster. When reading poetry, try speaking it aloud to get a sense of what the poet may have intended, given the shape and structure of the language. Let's talk about a few basic concepts that apply to literature as a whole. First, the theme of a work of literature is the main idea or general topic being treated. All of the elements of literature, including choice of language, characters, events, and setting, contribute to the overall theme of a work. Second, denotation refers to the literal meaning of the words used, while connotation refers to what words evoke indirectly. The words dirty pair of work shoes literally just mean footwear that is dirty, but connote, possibly, the hard work that is being done to earn a living. Now let's examine some literary structures that have been common in the history of literature. First, we have narrative and narrator. The narrator is controlled by the author, and the narrator controls the audience in turn. Episodic narrative consists of a series of vignettes that don't necessarily gel. They are disconnected, but united by some common features such as the characters or setting. The epics of Homer are examples of episodic narratives, as well as Don Quixote by the Spanish author Cervantes. In Cervantes' work, the protagonist or main character is Don Quixote, who fancies himself an old-fashioned knight, even though knights of the medieval sort had been long extinct by the 17th century. In one funny episode, Don Quixote sees windmills in the distance and decides to joust with them because he sees them as giants. His squire, Sancho Panza, tries to get him to cease his jousting, but not before Don Quixote shatters his lance on the sail of a windmill. Organic narrative, by contrast, is a tightly interwoven narrative where consistency is maintained and everything relates to a center or theme. For example, Maxim Gorky's Her Lover is a short story about a woman named Teresa who asks the narrator to write a letter to her lover. It is revealed that Teresa does not actually have a lover when she comes back to the narrator to ask him to write another letter, this time from her lover back to her. Gorky, it seems, is able to reveal something about the loneliness of Teresa and the universal desire for love through his story. Quest narratives, on the other hand, are narratives in which a protagonist sets out to find something of great value. Moby Dick by Herman Melville is a great example of the quest narrative. The novel dissects the nature of good and evil through Captain Ahab's search for the white whale. Finally, the lyric, which is usually a poem, reveals a limited but deep feeling about something or event. Let's take a look at two examples from the 19th century. First, John Keats's sonnet on the awareness of death. When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain, before high-piled books and charactery hold like rich garners the full ripened grain, when I behold upon the night-starred face huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, and think that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance, and when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone, and think till love and fame to nothingness do sink. Now, Emily Dickinson's Untitled poem about being intoxicated by the very air of nature. I taste a liquor never brewed, from tankards scooped in pearl. Not all the Frankfurt berries yield such an alcohol. Inebriate of air am I, and debauchee of dew, reeling through endless summer days from inns of molten blue. When landlords turn the drunken bee out of the foxglove's door, when butterflies renounce their drams, I shall but drink the more. Till seraphs swing their snowy hats and saints to windows run, to see the little tippler leaning against the sun. Both poems are highly concentrated bursts of emotion, though they have very different effects on the mind. Now we can turn to 5 literary details that are important in analyzing works of literature. First, we have imagery, which is basic to all genres of literature, but is strongest in poetry. Next, we have metaphor, which is an intensification of language by comparison of one thing to another. We can see a great example of this in Shakespeare's Sonnet 73, which compares late age to autumn. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang, upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bear ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereupon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Symbols, by contrast, are complex images that evoke ideas and feelings that aren't explicitly mentioned in a work. For example, William Blake's The Sick Rose, written in 1794, seems to use a sickly rose as a symbol of decaying nature and time's destruction of all that is beautiful. O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night, in the howling storm, has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy. Irony is a contradiction in expectation or intention that reveals meaning. Sarcasm is a common form of irony, as is satire. For example, Edward Arlington Robinson's Richard Cory shows us that the appearance of things is not always the reality. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked, but still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything, to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked, and waited for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. Finally, diction is the choice of words made for their impact in a literary setting. As you can see from the preceding examples, sound and sense dominate literature. That's about all the time we have for this lecture. Thank you, and see you soon.